Again, welcome everyone. I have been looking forward to this next session for quite some time. As Corey mentioned, we have Dr. Corliss Thompson from Northeastern University's Graduate School of Education. She serves as our assistant dean, um, as well as a full-time faculty member. And her focus has really been on evaluation and assessment, as well as having a focus on equity and social justice and change agency. I have no doubt that she has more to say about all that she cares about and all that she's doing, in particular with the NSF grant that Corey referenced earlier, and how it's taken us to Little Rock, another CAPS affiliation. We also have Antonio Boyd, which, as Corey mentioned, COO at Future of Schools. I was a lucky panelist last Friday. He invited me to be part of a conversation then. It was awesome. Great prep for today. He's also president and CEO of Think Tank Consulting and an amazing doctoral student at Northeastern's Graduate School of Education. How lucky are we to have you, Antonio? Also, Mike Poore will be joining us. I don't see him on just yet. I have a feeling there's probably a tech issue that we'll be resolving, but he is formerly the superintendent of Bentonville, Arkansas, and that's where I understand he first worked with the CAPS network. And now he is working to transform the Little Rock School District as superintendent there and continuing his work with the CAPS network. And we have had great beginning conversations about what we are learning as far as pathways and opportunities for students of color, and in particular, underserved populations in STEM fields. Today, this stellar group, I'm so excited, is coming together to talk about equity access in the COVID-19 era. I believe also touching on some of the civil rights issues that we talked about earlier. So please join me in welcoming our panelists, and thank you for joining us today, friends. We will start with Dr. Thompson and Mr. Antonio Boyd while we work to get Superintendent Poore to join us. Corliss, Antonio, please feel free to jump in.
I'm sure. Well, I can go ahead and get the conversation started. First, I think it's great for us all to be here, and there's just a few ideas that I think can really help us frame the conversation in terms of where we want to go. First, I'd say that we want to have a frank conversation today about the challenges that we're facing and how we can move ahead. And we want to recognize the heightened challenges of the moment for people that have been affected personally by COVID-19, and also people that have been personally affected by racial injustice, police violence, and all the other implications of what's happening right now. And even though we want to be sensitive to these issues, we know that the way to address them is to move forward and engage in conversations, as Corey and Lydia have mentioned. And so I think in the conversation today, we want to have some of those conversations and really definitely end on what can we do? What are some actions that we can take in this given moment right now? And so there's four values in mind as I think about the beginning of the conversation. And so for us as experiential educators, first is, what does that mean? What do we mean by experience? What brings us here? And for me, it's really about helping learners to engage in some kind of meaningful activity, notion, experience that looks different depending on what context you're in. And it's helping them connect to it and then developing and growing based on those particular experiences. So what might be experiential for one student might not be experiential for another student. And it really depends on how we're creating these approaches. The other value that we want to keep in mind is having an affirming perspective, right? Like we want to value all people, all perspectives, all different backgrounds. So affirming instead of having a deficit perspective. We want to create spaces for access. And we also want to create spaces where people can write or influence their own experience and address systemic barriers. And so in my work as an associate teaching professor, I'm working on an NSF grant that looks at the CAPS network to understand how they actually are doing a lot of these different things. And so that's kind of a bit of a sense of who I am and kind of what I'm doing. I'll pass the baton to maybe Antonio, you can talk about your work and kind of what brings you to this moment.
Sure. So excited to be a part of this and to be with Dr. Thompson, one of my professor mentors. Also, Dr. Unger, who I know is on here circulating somewhere in an exciting fashion. But I want to just give voice to the wonderful students that I work with across South Carolina and North Carolina. Hold on, phone ringing.
They're probably calling you right now, Antonio. They're
Yeah,
so excited for you.
Dr. Unger calling me. But I wanted to give a shout out to the students from Academic Magnet High School in Charleston, North Carolina. I mean, South Carolina, the number one high school in the nation that is focused on issues of race around experiential learning and using experiential learning to help to recruit and involve and engage students of color in their school. I want to talk about the High School for Health Professions in rural Orangeburg, South Carolina, where they're 100% poverty and 100% free and reduced lunch. But they've graduated 100% of their students the last 4 years because of experiential learning. I want to talk about Youth Corps, which is in Columbia, South Carolina, where I am. It's 90 degrees here, folks, so it's really hot. And this organization has graduated over 500 students through their programs through experiential learning, and all of those students have gone on to careers and professions. And then lastly, I want to talk about the Olympic high school experience, and Mike Relon is probably on this call, and the fantastic job that they've done to give students of color access to a quality education. Mike says it best. We want to make sure every student has the opportunity to live up to their human potential. And so to me, my research is about the impact of experiential learning on students of color. And those five schools and organizations represent that in a powerful way. And I'm glad they're here today. This is their first time being with the Next and CAPS network. And I hope that they can become a part of future opportunities that you guys are sharing.
Thank you, Antonio. Superintendent Mike Poore, we did a very brief intro of you. So glad to have you join us. What we're hoping to hear is what you are bringing to the conversation today and what you're hoping to engage in.
That's an open-ended book right there. Boy, I don't know where I could just take off. And it's so exciting to join all of you and be with my friends in the CAPS network. I know that we have some of our staff with LRSD Excel program on, and then so many others that I've got to know through the network. In my hope today that we end up kind of tackling through your efforts and Ms. Thompson, that we get to talk about, what it's like to try to do this for some students that we don't necessarily think of as having an opportunity to take on and grab a hold of really advanced career planning and programs. And it's my belief and what I'm seeing in Little Rock that actually is totally executable, and in an urban environment or an environment where there's a lot of children that are disadvantaged and come from lower incomes, that you can do this. And in fact, we must do it because that's where we're going to generate our future, and we will just be blown away by what's possible with young people. So that's kind of my initial salvo at everybody, and so proud to join all of you today.
Thank you. Corliss, were you sharing? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I can go ahead and jump in with the next topic. And I think that one of the things that's important for all of us is kind of acknowledgement of the moment, right? COVID-19, like we can't not talk about it. So I would love to just learn a little bit more from Antonio and Mike. Maybe they can start to talk about kind of what has COVID-19 brought to their table, since they have probably some more concrete examples, and then I can share my experience.
Okay, I'll go first, and then I'll let the superintendent from the great school district speak to that. So, at Future Schools, we're the nation's leading public charity on access, and we were founded actually as the foundation on blended and online learning. So, for us, the last 5 or 6 months has been very powerful and meaningful because it brought the issue that we are passionate about to the fore. And what we've kind of framed this time period as, we don't call this online and blended learning right now because we haven't been in the space of online and blended learning or remote learning. we've been in a space we call crisis schooling. We know that, as Lydia shared earlier about being a parent in this time, that it really wasn't education. I'm a student of a scholar named Suja who talks about schooling versus educating. And Suja speaks about the fact that in poor and underserved communities, there's a lot of schooling going on, but not a lot of educating. Well, in COVID-19, it magnified that situation at the highest power, and we've seen crisis schooling going on. And our goal and our focus as an organization is to actually remove the crisis barrier and move students and teachers to remote educating. And so been doing a lot. We set up right at the beginning of COVID-19 a project called the Teacher Triage, where we actually got the best practices in blended and online learning from across the country, from companies like K-12, Pearson, Edgenuity, and asked them to provide all the access that they could to their best practices around teaching, and then make that available to teachers across the country. We started a new initiative right now called the Resilient School Project. We really believe that because of just even the politics we're seeing in our country right now, the schools are going to need to be resilient. So what we're doing is standing up not only the best companies in the ed tech field, but also companies like Google and Microsoft to come together to provide school districts, schools, and teachers the best technology and the best access to online and blended learning at one place. Superintendents across the country have told us that it's a hodgepodge of opportunities out here, and they are not clear on where they can go to get the resources they need. So we're working with the Digital Learning Collaborative to bring all those resources to one place. And my colleague Amy Valentine is putting up the website, and we're inviting districts to come in and be a part of cohorts of learners and teachers so that you can learn the best practice, easy access, so that you can go from crisis schooling to what we believe is remote education. So we're excited about that, and love to talk about it more.
Antonio, I think your phrasing around crisis schooling as the way the year ended is a very apt description. I mean, it really captures how so many of us were feeling. And I remember from our conversation on Friday, there was a lot of discussion about, the challenges that schools are facing with regards to actually accessing online and remote learning. Before we turn to Superintendent Poore, could you talk a little bit about your efforts with regards to you know, making the cloud, if you will, accessible to the schools with whom you work?
Yes, so what we've done is we've asked Pearson, K-12, Ingenuity, all the top companies in the space who've been in the space for years and who really have online and blended down. We've asked them to come together and work with school districts, charter school districts, public school districts, online districts, anybody who wants access to this information. What we're going to do then is we put those districts in cohorts where they actually have representatives from their district that can learn the best practices, so that when school starts, you're not in a space where you're still in crisis, but you're actually accessing the best information on online and blended learning. We also have been, since the beginning of the pandemic, giving out the Teacher of the Week award, where we give teachers who are in compromised situations $150 just to go buy their families a dinner one night or go buy technology. We've also stood up the crisis relief fund for teachers, where we are getting donations from corporations that, like in Anderson 5 school district in my state, they didn't have computers, Chromebooks, when this pandemic started. The funding that we're able to get from these corporate partners, we actually were able to get teachers Chromebooks. They didn't have that access to that technology. We're also giving out innovative teachers, innovative educator prizes, where you can get a $10,000 donate, actually grant, if you have an innovative idea around online and blended learning. We're giving scholarships to students. What we're doing is lifting up the student voice, because students are also going through this process. And I'm happy to say that we gave a scholarship this year, 2 years ago, to Jamal Lee, who's from Iowa Big, which is a part of this network. And Jamal says that online and blended was the best way for him. And now he's the first person in his family that gets to go to college. So we're trying to work at every level, at the school level, at the district level, at the teacher level, and at the student level to make this transition go from crisis schooling to what we call real remote learning. So we'll put up the information, but we invite you to come be a part of this resilient school project. And we already have over 30 districts across the country already involved.
Thank you, Antonio. And Superintendent Poore, Antonio talks about working from the district level. That's exactly where you sit. Perhaps you could share some of the work that you've been doing and how you've been able to continue or adjust engaging in experiential learning, profession-based learning with your students and with your district.
Yeah, I'll try to start first with just a few items from the district level, and that we made a huge investment with getting devices into the hands of our students. We're a district of just around 22,000 students, and we put out over 12,000 devices to our students. Currently, one of the things that was a little bit of a hole, we had internet providers providing deals, so to speak, and we also provided some access points for those that were struggling. But we need a better solution, especially even in middle income families where you have families that are maybe both parents working from home and 2 or 3 kids working at home. No one has enough bandwidth. And that actually became an economic problem, which fits into kind of the CAPS model of a real issue of what do you do? And guess what? The folks that are helping us with career education now are also helping us with broadband. So we actually have the city of Little Rock and our Chamber of Commerce working together to try to find a solution with broadband. And it's kind of been interesting, because all of us have experienced through this that prices have gone up on things.
Mhm.
Need arises. Well, in this case, we're actually creating a business model that's making the internet providers lower their price because they're seeing that they can have a different business model that has greater outreach to folks. So we've dropped from, we're in negotiations, but I can say right now we've gone from about a $50 price point down to now about $15, and we're still working at it. So that's per month, unlimited data. So I'm kind of proud of that. We have to tie up all the loose ends on that, but we're working hard at it. I think the other thing is that we've had to adjust with our own staff and move quickly to not only have devices for our students, but have up-to-date devices for our staff. So we've ordered brand new laptops for every employee within this district to better prepare them for kind of that whole concept of either being more prepared in a traditional school setting or in a virtual setting. That's coming, and we know we'll have to do training. The other end of this that I don't want to forget is that we also know that there's going to need to be training for our staff of how, we've had kids that have been away from school environment for 6 months. They're dealing with a pandemic. They're also dealing with the Black Lives Matter, what has transpired since the just craziness of the George Floyd issue, and how do people really deal and react with that. So we're really looking at professional development with all stakeholders. That would mean students, staff, and parents, and those things are all being executed right now. We had to back away in the spring, and I almost say this with guilt and probably deserve to be guilty about it, that we backed away and we went basically at the secondary level with core classes to finish off the semester. And we all know that that's not a long-term solution because the classes that are engaging kids and sometimes keeping them in school are these career ed classes or the fine arts. And we are committed to making sure that happens. Our Excel team, one of the benefits, if you're not a part of the CAPS network, I'll make a commercial right now to say that, having, teachers that do medical prep or folks that do teacher prep or individuals that are working on technology classes, interacting together and coming up with plans of how to continue with learning even in a virtual environment. I think it's possible, and I'm excited about that opportunity. I liked how Antonio kind of shared that this is an opportunity. It's not something that we should just cower behind. I tremble a little bit. Okay, I got some shaky knees sometimes, but I also am excited about what it's bringing out in us, and that we have our business partners stepping up, we have our staff stepping up, and I think ultimately our kids will help guide us a little bit in terms of what we need to do as we advance forward. So I I hope that answers your question, Linda.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I think one of the key things that I've been thinking about in particular with this panel is, the intersection of uh, classroom education, industry, if you will, community partnerships, and higher education. And Dr. Thompson represents one piece of that with higher education. And Dr. Thompson, I don't know if you'd like to jump in and share a little bit about your perspective with regards to the work.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Lydia. So I think that there's a couple things that we want to keep in mind. So listening to, Dr. Poore and Antonio's examples, one of the things that I keep hearing about is this idea of access, right? And so when we think about equity, it's about access, but there's more to it than just access. So one of the questions that I ask myself, and that I ask as I move through any teaching endeavor or research endeavor, regarding access and really thinking about social justice is, are we giving people access to a society that meets their needs, a society, an organization, a classroom, an experience, a profession-based learning experience? Does it meet their needs? And then not only that, the second part of the definition is, have they been able to give voice to what those needs are? So many times we're deciding for families and students and people what they need. And we're missing the part around voice, and giving voice to the students, to the learners, to the educators, to really understand what it would look like for them to have that particular piece of equity. And so in particular for an experiential learning environment or a profession-based environment, with regards to the NSF study that we're working on, one of the core things that we've had to do is really say, what is the profession-based learning model? Exactly what does it look like? And then how do we frame equity around it? So one piece that we've looked at is that we know with experiential learning, it's not that kids are just sitting and they're getting information, right? But part of it is like actually just being in a certain space. Through being in a certain space and then picking up on different cues and noticing different things, people are being exposed and they bring in a lot of that information, right? And so part of what we've noticed through looking at the CAPS network is that they have all of these different things where young adults are actually picking up on what it means to be in these different spaces in ways that we wouldn't even be able to, just tell them. They pick up on it through being in the environment. They're in a particular climate that speaks to the profession-based learning. So in terms of experiential learning broadly, I think we have to think about the climate. And then in terms of the actual profession-based learning experiences, what are the learners actually doing? How are they engaging with business partners? What kind of problems and projects are they actually solving? And again, that's another key part of the experience. It's not that we're telling them, what to do. They're figuring it out. And that's what we've been able to witness. So when we see that profession-based learning model and we lay access and equity on top of it, we have to look at, are we actually providing our students access to the climate of what it means to be working in these spaces or to be a citizen in these spaces? And then regarding the profession-based learning experiences, are we giving them access to the projects and problems? Are they getting to solve real things? Are they actually able to solve and do the work that adults engage in all the time? And that's another piece of it. But then once we have those things in place and we've given them access, the next step is to look at those students, their voices and what they actually need. And what we've noticed is that if we're not intentional about looking at those experiences, we can recreate opportunity gaps if we're not careful. If we're not looking to say, this group over here doesn't necessarily have access to kind of industries that might exist, across town. We would want to take action to make sure that we're closing those opportunity gaps by giving the kids access to it. So it's not enough for us to just say, okay, yeah, we're doing this. We have to take an intentional, critical look to really look at that access and then the voice piece to make sure that we're getting students what they need.
Thank you, Dr. Thompson. Mike, did you want to jump in?
I did, and I hope that this will complement what Dr. Thompson was saying. I want to first compliment the St. Louis group of CAPS Network that brought us hackathons, and we participated in that, and I know a lot of folks did, but then we took it back and took different ownership of actually doing, and I believe Corey's told us that we're the first to do a hackathon within our school district, within our Excel CAPS program. And we've done multiple hackathons, and the most recent one was for the Water Reclamation Authority. So here it is, we're allowing a group of students across all different career strands coming together to be solution oriented, to have young people's voice really matter, and being that voice being allowed to be provided towards the board of directors for the Water Reclamation Authority to share a solution for infrastructure problems with what's below our ground on piping, which is really a problem everywhere in this country, that we have stuff that's aging and falling apart. And how can we do that more efficiently? I can tell you, when our kids, who probably knew nothing about this problem before they jumped into it, what they came up with as a solution, the board of directors was blown away. And I'll just give a hint that it was all tied towards using already waste materials in terms of plastics to go use that as a part of the solution for this infrastructure issue. And so, the hackathon thing, I want to bring that in because St. Louis did such a good job of it. And then what we can go do to bring our different career strands together to create problems, to get solutions to problems, and do the things that Dr. Thompson is advocating for. Because I think we do that in the network pretty well within our strands, but having people come together and collaborate across strands, that's super impactful.
There's some great questions happening in the chat that I know we'll want to, turn to, but I see a lot of questions around, what are the types of questions that we can ask? How do we engage our community members and families? How do we define profession-based learning? And I think a lot of the the conversation that we've been having around equity and access also has to do with the trust of kids, right? Like, what happens when we trust our kids to help us lead the way? And I know that we only have 3 minutes. I knew that this was not going to be enough time for us, actually. Am I correct in 3 minutes? Hopefully it's a little bit longer than that. Nope, 3 minutes. So I apologize for the short amount of time. Would each of you like to maybe respond to one of the questions around community, engaging families, partners, just from your perspective and your practice?
I would like to say something in response to. I
Sorry,
think Dr.
we have 8 minutes, Antonio, so don't don't rush too much. Sorry,
Oh,
my mistake on
no
timekeeping.
I think Dr. Thompson hit on something, but I want to take it a little deeper. Let me give you an example. When she talks about making, my research says that it agrees totally with what she says. And when she talks about making experiential learning available for students of color, what she's talking about is a program atmosphere and culture. So at the end of the day, in South Carolina, in rural Orangeburg, where these students are 100% poverty, 100% free and reduced lunch, they walk into a high school that is in a medically underserved community that has a low number of African American medical professionals. And the first thing they see is a doctor and a dentist that looks like them. It sets the tone and the atmosphere for the school. Then they get to put on the short white jacket as freshmen and sophomores, saying that they're going into medical careers and they're going to be professionals. As they matriculate through the school, they interact with nurses, doctors, and dentists and pharmacists that look like them. And by the time they're seniors, they decided what area they want to go to. The culture and atmosphere of that experiential learning allows these students to be involved in culturally responsive teaching, which then allows them to be freer to kind of think clearly where they want to go. But the community that they live in, they see the need and have voice in that community from the first day, because they know that there will be the future professionals in that community. So in their their junior and senior year, they go to junior college, and by the time they're seniors, they're phlebotomists before they're doctors. Now they're working in the hospitals. They become the breadwinners in their families. This is the kind of availability and access that students of color need if we're going to do experiential learning that gives opportunity for all. So I think that is key. We have to create spaces where these students can help in their communities and have projects that help their communities and meet the needs of their families.
Thank you, Antonio.
I can just build on what Antonio said and also reference some of the questions. I mean, I think what you just said, Antonio, relates to what was in the chat box from Grace. And she asked the question, are we giving them access to real work? Are we giving learners access to real work? And I think that what you said about, finding out from the students, connecting them to things that matter for their communities is a big piece of it. And what I'll just say in terms of what I've learned in terms of access is that it's what we're seeing is that it's kind of on a spectrum right now. And I think that there's a lot of different reasons for that. And some of where we've visited and what we've seen kids involved in like actual projects alongside professionals within industry. Um, and then we've seen kids in classrooms involved in projects that are also connected to industry, right? So they might not be in that particular space at the moment, but they might be doing the work. And then we've also seen kids that have had challenges, getting to that level of doing the projects. I mean, that's part of the challenge, I would say, related to equity. And I think an important piece of this for us as educators is thinking about student development and how do we prepare learners to be able to engage at that higher level, higher order of thinking so that they can attack and get these projects done. And so what I would say to answer Grace's question directly is, no, I don't think all the time we are giving our students access to the experiences that they need. We're not giving them access to real work. However, I think that each school, each classroom, each program, each educator is the best person suited to begin figuring out how do we do that and how do we shift it. Another challenge that we saw towards giving kids real work is resources. There are some places where people have lots of professionals, lots of access to industry, and they know how to tap into it. There are other schools and other places where people don't know how to necessarily make those connections. Now, does that mean it can't happen? No. It just means that we've got to work towards helping the people that don't know how to create the access for their students. How do they make those connections to the people in their backyard? And so, again, I would say it's kind of there's principles across, I think, experiential learning, profession-based learning that we can apply, but it really takes an individual perspective, individual assessment of each learning experience, each school, in order to be able to provide some of those things. And I have one more quick comment. It was about the chat post about surveys and families. And it kind of relates back to what I just described. If we're going to survey families about what they have access to, what they can provide, again, it's going to depend on where you are, who your populations are, and what makes sense for them. So if possible, instead of just kind of sending out a survey and expecting to know exactly what people want, if you can, test it out. And that's one of the other things that I've learned from the work in the CAPS network. It's like fail fast, right? So go ahead and put together a survey, send it to some people that are in your district to get their best thinking on it, and then connect with somebody in the community and ask them about the questions. How do those questions make them feel? What do they respond? What do they get offended by, et cetera? That way the next iteration can be better than the first. And I have some other ideas for survey development, which I won't get into now, but feel free to put it in the chat box and I can follow up on that.
Thank you. Mike?
Thank you. And it's tough to follow after those two, but I want to take maybe a giant leap backwards because I'm sure people that are on this Zoom setting, they're in a variety of different places. One of the things we can't forget is that business wants to partner with us just as badly as we want to partner with them. But there's maybe a little bit of a distrust or things haven't necessarily gone quite the right way. One of the things that I did, both in Bentonville, which I know there's some Bentonville folks on the Zoom today, and I want to shout out to them because they've got a great program in Ignite. And then the Little Rock example here is that we went to Bentonville with Little Rock business leaders. We took leaders from Bentonville up to Kansas City and look at Northland CAPS as well as Blue Valley CAPS. And that is a starting point for business people to really see what's possible. And hopefully some of you would even come to Little Rock right now to look at what we're doing in an urban environment, because there are those connections and people can do this relatively easily because people are wanting to invest right now, understanding that we've got to do something different. On the other side of it, kids are just starving to have their voice heard. We can't forget that, so many times, and I share this, I see Dr. Unger now on the chat, that, we have adults say, oh, these kids are disinterested. Look at them. Look how they walk in the mall, pants sagging, don't. Well, when did we show them respect? When did we give them the opportunity to use their voice, solutions that are really impactful, meaningful? And the other thing that I know our kids really enjoy is they love the fact when they get to interact with some of the people that are really important in this community and just talk and think. And we've been very, very fortunate in Little Rock that we have the heads of all the hospitals not only allowing classes to take place in their institutions, but that they're giving them real internships and then they're going and spending time with them. That's the kind of investment we can have. And it generates from the CAPS network, and it's really just leadership on our part that we all have to kind of just do it. And it's been done in settings all over the place. And so if you're coming on to this and thinking about joining the CAPS network, it couldn't be a better time, especially in this virtual world, to join this type of organization.
Folks, my Oscar music is moving me off the stage. I want to say a deep thanks, deep gratitude to Dr. Thompson, Superintendent Poore, Mr. Antonio Boyd. Thank you so much for your presence and your conversation today. I know we could have spent a lot more time on this and the work you're doing. And